Hey, what's going on, APUSH peeps? We have period 3 review for you. I'm going to try to do this in about 10 minutes. Look at the top here to figure out what chapters of your textbook it matches with. And if you want a more detailed explanation of anything in here, check out the link below. I have period 3 divided into 3 separate videos, which will explain this stuff in really good detail. But for now, I'm just going to try to hit on the big ideas, everything you need to know about period 3 in 10 minutes. All right, 1754 to 1763, that is the French and Indian War. And this was also known as the 7 Years' War. This was caused by the English encroachment onto French lands, or the English going onto French lands. Now, it's called the French and Indian War, and most natives, except for the Iroquois Confederation, they were split. They sided with the French. So this war pits the French and the natives against the British and the colonists. Now, Great Britain wins the war, and France is removed from North America. And that has huge impacts on both the Native Americans and the colonists. We see a huge shift in power in North America. Conflicts begin to emerge between American colonists and the natives as the colonists seek to expand. An example of this is Pontiac's Rebellion, which happens in this area here, the Ohio, Michigan area. And this is where a Native American chief, Pontiac, led a rebellion against the British colonists. And in response, the British issued the Proclamation Line of 1763, which stated that the colonists could not go past this line here, which is the Appalachian Mountains. And the colonists are very resentful of this because they just fought to gain all this land, and they're not allowed to be there. All right, Britain is in debt from the war. They end salutary neglect, and they begin to take a more active or hands-on approach in colonial affairs. If you're writing an essay about the French and Indian War, here's your thesis statement. The French and Indian War drastically and forever changed the relationship between the British and the colonists. Britain begins to pass a series of acts, including the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Intolerable Acts. All these were a way of them to take a more active role. And in terms of the Stamp Act and Townshend Acts, this was a way for them to raise revenue. And the colonists resisted this new control. They did not like it. They formed groups like the Stamp Act Congress, which was meant to repeal the Stamp Act, the Committees of Correspondence, which spread information amongst the different colonies, and the First Continental Congress. All of these were examples of colonial unity against the British. Now, whether you were an elite like Paul Revere or John Hancock, or really an average everyday colonist, many were united against the British. They did not like that salutary neglect ended. But do keep in mind, up until 1776, most colonists did not want independence. They simply longed for or wanted to go back to the days of salutary neglect, which were pre-1763. So they wanted to go back to what life was like before the French and Indian War. Now, let's talk about 1776 to 1783, the war itself. Things change in January of 1776 when Thomas Paine, this guy down here, writes a book called Common Sense. And in this book, he urged America to break away. And this was hugely influential in the Declaration of Independence. So let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. This is a list of grievances or problems against King George III, or KG3, and this provided a justification for breaking away. It was definitely inspired by common sense, and it was definitely inspired by Enlightenment ideas, especially John Locke. You see his theory of natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams changed that to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You also see this idea of the consent of the governed, that the people have the real power, not the government. So at the end of this war, how the heck did the colonists win this thing when really the odds were against them? Well, they had familiarity with the land. It was their homeland. They had very good military leadership under people like George Washington, who was able to inspire many people to fight. They were fighting for this idea of republicanism or natural rights and consent to the governed, and that it was the people that had the power. And definitely, hugely important, they had foreign aid, particularly from the French. And France provided aid after the Americans won the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. So definitely be able to explain why the colonists won the war. During the war, we have the development of the Articles of Confederation, and there's this fear of a centralized power. Keep in mind, the Articles are basically going to be 180 degrees different than life under Great Britain. The Articles provided for a weak central government. The federal government could not tax. There was no executive branch, and most of the power was left to the states. It's essentially like there are 13 independent countries. Trade issues emerged between the states because of tariffs on goods shipped between states, and also because the currencies of the states had different values. So we have the Northwest Land Ordinance of 1787, which is specifically mentioned in the new curriculum. Definitely know this, wicked, wicked important. This provided a process for admitting new states, and it's all this area in the black here. Once a territory reached 60,000 people, it could apply for statehood. And a very important thing to know is that slavery was banned in the Northwest Territory. This is the first congressional ban on slavery. So if you're writing an essay about slavery, you could definitely trace the roots to the Northwest Territory in terms of banning slavery in different areas of the country. Tensions emerged in different areas of the country in this big idea of East versus West. East tends to be where the elites or the power lies, whereas the western portions of states or the country is where newer money or poor people live, and also where there's not a lot of government power. And there tends to be some conflicts. Really, some examples, you have the Paxton Boys in Pennsylvania who had issues with Native Americans and killed about 20 of them. And then Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts. They were upset with the Massachusetts state government levying taxes and taking away farms of farmers out in western Massachusetts. So, what is the impact of the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution on a worldwide scale? Well, we see revolutions in France, Haiti, and Latin America. And here in particular is a painting based on events from July 14, 1789, the storming of the Bastille, which is the beginning of the French Revolution. So you see other countries throughout the world take these ideas that the Americans instituted and they want them as well. So although some called for greater equality, and you have Abigail Adams writing to her husband John saying, hey, please remember the ladies, and Pennsylvania passes an emancipation law which bans slavery, framers of the Constitution really did not address these issues, and especially the issue of slavery. Keep in mind, if the framers banned slavery in the Constitution, no southern states that had slavery would go along with the Constitution, and it never would have passed. So the Constitution really is built on a series of compromises. You have the Great Compromise and the Three-Fifths Compromise, both of which dealt with the issue of representation in Congress. And the Slave Trade Compromise said that the importation of slaves could not be ended prior to 1808. The Constitution was only ratified or passed after the Federalists, and that's those people that were in favor of the Constitution, promised the anti-Federalists, or those that were afraid of the Constitution, this new power under the central government, a Bill of Rights would be added. And they were, in fact, and those are the first 10 amendments. So what are some challenges to this new government under the Constitution? There are many early on. We have navigation issues on the Mississippi River. Spain was in control of the Mississippi for a long time, and they forbid the United States from having access to this Mississippi River. And that's oh so important for shipping. And keep in mind, the United States now has all this territory over here. So they want to be able to ship on here, especially down in New Orleans, which will give access to the Gulf of Mexico. Pinckney's Treaty was signed to address that, and Spain gave the United States the right to navigate on the Mississippi. And we also have relations with natives. It's not defined in the Constitution. And land issues with the natives emerged as the natives began to cede more and more of their land to the Americans. You see that with the Treaty of Grenville in Ohio. Washington's farewell address happens. Is actually not an address, it's a written letter, and in it he warned of entangled foreign alliances and political parties. And political parties do emerge even though he was against them. You see the emergence of the Federalists, which are led by Hamilton, and Republicans, which are led by Jefferson. And it's really not until after World War II that you see the United States get involved in foreign alliances. So Washington's farewell address is so influential. It's not just entangled alliances, ladies and gentlemen. Definitely know that he was weary of political parties as well. Debates over the power of government emerged for decades to come. Who really has power? Is it the state government? Is it the national government? The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were written by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in response to the Alien and Sedition Acts, and they urged states to nullify a federal law. And there was this question at the time, could states nullify or void a federal law? And the answer is no. The Constitution states that it's the supreme law of the land. However, this idea of states having the power, since they created the Constitution, that's called the compact theory, will really be around for decades to come. And this question will not be finally settled until the Civil War, until after the Civil War. All right, so one last thing we'll finish up with that is so important it gets its own slide. It's something called Republican motherhood. And after the Revolutionary War, women gained few, if any, rights. Married women still had to give their property to their husbands, any property they had before they got married. Now, the idea of Republican motherhood is the belief that women were expected to instill Republican virtues, which basically means these ideas of liberty, natural rights, into children and be active in their families. This does help improve education for women because women were expected to play an important role educating their children. This is an idea that will be around for a very, very long time, that women should be the guiding force of the families and raise children to be good citizens of the United States. Okay, guys, that's pretty much everything you need to know for Period 3. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the section below. Make sure you check out the more detailed videos that I have on Period 3 if you need any more explaining. And I thank you guys very much for watching. Good luck on any and all of your tests this year, especially the one in May. Best of luck. Thank you for watching and have a good day.